Hello and welcome back. My name is Miriam. Once again, we meet at sunset, and this video has the very, very real possibility of being filmed in the dark by the time we are done. But it is what it is, and we're going to persevere. So, as you can tell by the title of this video, today we are going to be tier ranking every single Shadowhunters book. If you are a Shadowhunters fan and you regularly consume booktube videos, you may or may not have seen me come across your recommended before. I have made a bit of a reputation for myself to be a fan of the Shadowhunters Chronicles. This was not always the case, but it is nonetheless the case currently. This video is a bit of a sequel to a video that I uploaded in 2020 entitled Reviewing Every Single Shadowhunters Book, and that video was so fun. It was the midst of quarantine, and I did in fact marathon every single Shadowhunters book in late 2019 and early 2020. I would very much recommend you go watch that video before watching this one. This is just an updated version of that video in a more interesting format. But long story short, if you have not seen that video, I was not always a Shadowhunters fan. I was not always a Cassandra Clare fan. I read a few of the Mortal Instruments books when I was in late middle school, early high school, and I was not fond of them. I DNF'd the series. I had pretty much resigned myself to never read another Cassandra Clare book again until I kind of just got really interested in the Infernal Devices and what I had heard about that series. You know, a lot of people, even to this day, joke about the Mortal Instruments. It has a very infamous reputation, but the Infernal Devices, it's silent. Like, no one dares utter a bad word about the Infernal Devices, and that is for a very good reason. I was interested in that, and I fell in love with a very specific character. And then I was like, yeah, I'm gonna have to read all 15 million of these books because I love that character so much. And he is an immortal character that haunts the narrative throughout the entire series. I was like, yeah, I will go to the ends of the world for him. So that's what I did. A bit of a disclaimer before we fully get into the video. I do have very subjective opinions on this series. I know that my favorite books are not everyone's favorite books. I know that my favorite characters are not everyone's favorite characters. I respect most opinions having to do with this series. Not all, but most. And this is just a fun time. Please comment on this video, but do not make the comments like the comments on my last video, the reviewing video, because the comments on that video are just a little crazy, just a tad unhinged. So let me just take you through the tiers that I have here, that I have cooked up for you. The tier that we have at the very top of the pyramid, the books that are most important to me that I could reread over and over again until the end of time, the books that I believe are Cassandra Clare's absolute best works, masterpieces, are going to be put in the tier entitled Gem Carstairs, because everything comes back to Gem Carstairs. He is the reason for the season. He is the reason for the entire existence of the Shadowhunter world as we know it. The Infernal Devices may not have come first. The rest of the series would not exist as it does without that series, and especially Gem Carstairs. He is absolutely everything to me. I think that this tier being on the top and this being at the beginning of the video tells you exactly where my loyalties lie. Second tier is called Whither Thou Goest, I Will Go. This is a part of the Parabatai Vows. If you know, you know. Books that go in this tier are missing just a little something, but they are still absolutely amazing books by Cassandra Clare, and books that I think that she absolutely succeeded on. Third tier is called Made an Impact, but not the biggest. Don't check the spreadsheets because they might not be there, but they did in fact make an impact on me, or maybe for the entire fandom, but not the biggest impact, but still a great book. Fourth tier is called Good but Questionable. Many such cases with Cassandra Clare. Good had elements that were interesting, but other elements that were very questionable. Next here is called We Have Lost the Plot, Judith. Judith is Cassandra Clare's government name, and I will be using her government name to address her when I talk about these books, because we just lost it. Like we had it and we lost it. And the book and maybe the series suffered for that lost plot. There's something going on, there's something afoot, and we are going to investigate where the plot went because we lost it. Next here, our lowest tier on the tier list. Send it to Thule, the UPS priority shipping, and have Lilith sign for it at the door. These books, I don't want to see them anymore. I don't think that they should exist on this plane of existence. I think we should send them to another one because it was trash. It was just complete trash, lowest of the low, and I think that they disgrace Cassandra Clare's good name. And then we do have an extra bonus tier that is called Haven't Read It Yet, because there are a couple of books that I have not read, and I do want to read some of them, but maybe some of them I don't want to read as much, and I don't know when or if I will be getting to them. So with that, let us begin. So we're pretty much going to go in publication order for this. I'm going to start with City of Bones. Now, City of Bones to me is a pretty iconic book. It's the first book in the Mortal Instruments series. It's the first book in the entire Shadowhunters Chronicles. It came out in the late years of the 2000s, and it definitely shows. But for that reason, it is a very nostalgic book for me. I think that it made a lot of strides in YA fantasy, especially bringing in the YA urban fantasy. The questionableness of the Mortal Instruments, the infamous and almost iconic questionableness, come in only at the very end of the book. And so for, 3/4 of the book, it's just a very fun fantasy romp, and it's just so fun. It really is so fun, even though I don't necessarily, let me just say it right now, I don't necessarily have the most attachment to the gang that we're following in the Mortal Instruments series, but this book in particular is very close to my heart. And so I think that I would put it in made an impact, but not the biggest. Now, it did actually make a big impact on both me and the industry and everything else I just said. But as a book with like the plot, progression, and the characters and the narrative and everything, it's messy and fun, but I wouldn't call it a great book in and of itself. So I think that it will have to go and made an impact, but not the biggest. City of Ashes. Again, if you have watched my video where I'm reviewing the books, you will know how I feel about City of Ashes. It's really crazy and really questionable. This book is literally the only thing that it consists of in my memory is a bunch of stuff about Simon becoming a vampire. They're basically running across New York City like headless chickens, trying to figure out Simon's vampirism and incest. That's literally all that this book is in my mind. The incest in this book is crazy because rightfully so, Clary and Jace are trying to come to terms with their newfound familial ties in this book, but it was egregious. I can't say that it wasn't. It was egregious. There is one iconic scene in this book, and that is when Simon's about to die because he needs to drink blood from someone. And I don't know if Jace is the first person that he ever drinks from, but nonetheless, Jace and Simon are like trapped somewhere together, and Jace like convinces Simon to feed off of him, and that scene is crazy. Something LGBT just happened to me. Something LGBT just happened to Jace when that happened. That whole scene, Cassandra Clare, I have got your number. I think, to be honest, I might have to ship it to Thule. Like, it wasn't necessarily the worst book in the world. You know what? No, because I actually, even with the incest, I think that this book is still better than another book that I'm going to put in this tier. So maybe I'll just put it in We Have Lost the Plot. I don't know. It was something very sinister going on when she was writing this. So I think that we lost the plot a little bit. I think we did. But we got it back when we wrote City of Glass. I think that this was like a really good conclusion to the first trilogy of the Mortal Instruments. I think that it was very interesting to see them go to Idris for the first time, all of them, and to see all of the plot lines unfold and like figuring out who the real villain was. That twist was really interesting the first time reading it. Yeah, I would say that this is a good book, but again, that incest, girl. We do get it resolved in this book, but we get it resolved well into the book after Clary and Jace are rolling around in the grass together, quite literally, in fact. So very, very questionable choices were still made. City of Fallen Angels, hello. We're sending it to an alternate universe because that book was straight up trash, garbage. It's the first in the second half of the Mortal Instruments series, so it's like the first book of the second trilogy, technically. It was a waste of my time. It was really bad. It focused a lot on Maya, Simon, and Isabel, if I can remember correctly. And the display of Maya's storyline of how she got turned into a werewolf and her abusive relationship with her boyfriend in that book, horrible, aged horribly, very, very, very bad, not good at all. To this day, that is the only book in the world that I have ever read that I've been compelled to give 1 star because it was just that bad. It was a waste of my time. And it was only like 300 pages long. Like, Cassandra Clare knew that she did not need to write that. Like, it was a pure filler book. Nothing of note happens until the very end of the book. Yeah, that book does not need to exist. It could have been an email. It absolutely could have been an email. City of Lost Souls. I'm right off the bat going to put this in good but questionable. This was the first Mortal Instruments book that I felt had like very, very real interesting elements that were interesting to me like as an adult, rather than just reading it as like, oh, it like writing it off as like a trashy read, which I feel like the first half of the series that can be written off as like a trashy fun read. But City of Lost Souls, I think, started to get into some really interesting questions that Cassandra Clare was posing, seeing the dynamics in that book between like Clary, Jace, and Sebastian were just really interesting. Very questionable scenes happening in this book, though. Those are supposed to be uncomfortable and they're not supposed to be viewed as positive, but very, very questionable. I do remember that this is the first book that we get Simon, Isabel, Magnus, Alec are like on a different quest than Clary and Jace, and I actually really, really liked seeing how the group functioned without Clary and Jace, because that just kind of added more to their characters, I think. I liked it. You know what? Maybe it made an impact. Still questionable, but I actually do think it did make a bit of an impact. Not gonna lie. So yeah, I guess that'll go there. City of Heavenly Fire. I think I will also put this in made an impact, but not the biggest. This actually, I mean, I did give it 5 stars. This was an incredible conclusion in my memory, in my 2020 memory. This was an incredible conclusion to the Mortal Instruments series. It wrapped everything up beautifully, in my opinion, and it was epic. I remember reading it and it almost felt like an Avengers Endgame kind of situation where we just got all of these things, all of these moving parts, and we, wrapped every single one of them up in a very epic battle. We had the return of Jem and Tessa, in this book, which was pretty much the entire reason I was reading the Mortal Instruments in the first place. I feel like in these last two entries of the Mortal Instruments, Cassandra Clare finally had a good grip on her characters, and she found a really good spot where they had developed very interestingly. So it did make an impact, but still not the biggest, because the Mortal Instruments is nowhere near my favorite Shadowhunter series. Speaking of favorite Shadowhunter series, Clockwork Angel, whither thou goest, I will go. Clockwork Angel is the beginning of the Infernal Devices series, which is my reason for existence, quite literally. This series changed my life, and even though I will say Clockwork Angel as a first book, as a book in and of itself, it's a little mid. It's definitely an introductory book to the series, and oftentimes I find myself telling people, like, you know, read the first book. It's cute, it's fine, but you really need to get to that second and third book in the series because they get better as they go along, in my opinion. And so even though this is the introduction to some of my favorite characters, some of my favorite plot lines, favorite dynamics, favorite relationships, I do think this first book is it's finding its footing. It's not the best, but it's still very iconic, and it brings you into the world. It gives you everything that you need to know, and it gives you just a taste of what's to come. And I think towards the end of the book, you really see how strong the series is going to come out to be by the end. Clockwork Prince, yup. Clockwork Princess, thank you. These two books changed me forevermore. I think that Cassandra Clare writing in this prose, in this style, is a gift to humanity. People who refuse to read Cassandra Clare are really missing out, especially if you like literary fiction, if you like historical romances, if you like historical dramas, anything that has that particular stylized prose of the 19th century. I think that Cassandra Clare excels at writing like this. I think that it translates not only in her dialogue that she writes, but also within the exposition. And this series also is very driven by books in real life as well. I know that A Tale of Two Cities is a big book that's mentioned within these books a lot. They're just beautiful. Polyamory, it's an amazing thing, isn't it, Heron Greystairs? The relationship dynamic between Tessa, Jem, and Will, especially Jem and Will, but definitely 1000% between all three of them, is gorgeous and amazing and stunning, and is like a story that just sticks with you for a lifetime. Truly. It's been a long time since I read the series, and I still remember so much of it very vividly. I have watched friends of mine read this on my suggestion in the past few years, and you know, sometimes I'm like, did I make this up? Like, how good it was? Did I, you know, was I reacting in an exaggerated way when I had such an emotional response to that last book? But I have been validated that that is not the case. So I just love this series so much. I really need to reread it. I think I might have to. Maybe soon. I don't know. Oh my God. It means so much to me. It means so much to me. We are now moving on to the Dark Artifices. So Lady Midnight, I will already go ahead and tell you that this is Jem Carstairs' tier to me. Is it? Yeah, I think it is, yeah. Kind of going back to City of Heavenly Fire, we met Emma and Julian and all of the Blackthorns in that book, and I think that it was an amazing way to bring them into the narrative and transition into their own series. Coming into Lady Midnight, you know and love these characters, and you get to see how they have changed over the 5 years that it's been since we last saw them. They have changed so much has happened, and there's just so much to uncover with these characters. And their histories and their tragic backstories are so rich with tragedy. And not only that, but it has the most delicious forbidden love story that I have probably ever read. Emma and Julian are insane. The way that they're written is so insanely intense, and the execution of that intensity is so right for this as a parabatai forbidden love story, because you can imagine that the person that you are linked to, like soul bonded to in this universe, you would be experiencing something very, very intense if you fell in love with them. And the way that it is reciprocated between the two of them, and it's forbidden, and they, you know, try not to give into it, but they just can't not. So we're definitely completely in the dark right now. That's insane. Lord of Shadows. Now, this book was really, really good. A really great follow-up to Lady Midnight. Very tragic and traumatizing ending. I think I rated it about 4 stars. I really, really liked this book. I liked how dark it got. I liked how deep they went into fairy lore in this book. The ending was so traumatizing, but I think it really, really fits. And it kind of gave us a look into what Cassandra Clare is capable of, because she had never really killed off a character in this capacity like she did at the end of this book. So it did really make an impact. I think I'm gonna have to put it in made an impact, but not the biggest. It's just not at that level where whither thou goest, I will go. I don't feel exactly that for Lord of Shadows, even though it's a really, really great book. I think I would put it, okay, let's do a little, yeah. I would put it at the beginning of this. And I think like that, yes. And let me, yeah. Okay. Queen of Air and Darkness. We have lost the absolute ever-living plot. We have lost the plot. We've lost our minds. I hated this book. Oh God, I hated it. I really disliked it so much. And I still gave it a 3 stars because I love the characters so incredibly much. But this book was so not good, and it's 900 pages and it's not good. Oh my God. It's 900 pages. It opens up about 130 plot threads that were not open already in the first 2 books in the series. So we're on the last book, we're on the conclusion, and you're going to open 10,000 plot threads in the last book, and then you are going to rush to not only close those plot threads, but close the other plot threads that we've actually been following since the first book. Okay, right. And then nothing gets a good conclusion. Okay. Hated the ending for Emma and Julian. I didn't like that. The whole Giants thing. Yeah, I didn't like it. And maybe it is because I wanted them to stay Parabatai and also stay in love. That's my problem. I think that I'm just a freak and I wanted to change the rules of the universe. And obviously the author, well, she could do that, but she wasn't going to do that. She wasn't going to change the rules that she laid out from the beginning. Well, that was on me. My bad. Hated the ending for Mark, Kieran, and Christina because if I remember correctly, they can't see each other. Like Mark and Christina have to go to this cabin on the edge of the fairy world because Kieran, I think he's king now of the fairies, of the Unseelie court, maybe something. And so Kieran is not allowed to leave for whatever reason that I don't remember. And Mark and Christina aren't allowed to enter for whatever reason that I don't remember. And then so they can only be together as a throuple in this cabin on the edge of the fairy world. I don't like it. It's probably gonna get resolved in the Wicked Powers. I don't like it. And then we have fantasy Shadowhunter equivalent of Trump supporters coming into the world and into the narrative of the story. I actually don't need to read about that in my comfort fantasy series. Actually, I don't think that I need that. So why did you add it, Cassandra Clare? Don't even ask me my opinion on the entire middle section of the book where Emma and Julian were in an alternate universe. I don't want to talk about it. Let's move on. Chain of Gold. Yes, one of the best books I've ever read in my life. Chain of Gold is a perfect book to me, like on every single category, in every single way. I think that this is a perfect book and a perfect story. The progression of the story, the fast pace, the amount of characters, and the way that the story builds up each of them and progresses all of these characters' relationships. We get such a clear view. Like, this is 1000% one of Cassandra Clare's strongest books in terms of both writing and plot. I think that it is executed to perfection. And I think as a book, I actually do prefer it. As a standalone book, I do prefer it to the Infernal Devices. I think that I have a crazy attachment to the Infernal Devices, but this book and Cordelia Carstairs and James Herondale and Alistair Carstairs, Thomas Lightwood, Anna and Ariadne, Matthew, Christopher, everybody, just wow. Y'all know how I feel. Y'all know how I feel if you've watched my vlogs on the Last Hours books, but this book is Chain of Thorns. Whither thou goest, I will go. I think that this book is really amazing. I really like the murder mystery going on throughout it. I really love the drama, like, oh my God. And this book just has a really big space in my heart because it was the first like really big arc that I received. And I did that like whole reading vlog on it and it was just so fun. And it was just like a core memory for me. Oh, it's such a messy book and it's so enjoyable for it. Chain of Thorns is the book that I really have changed my tune on. And I think I'm gonna have to put it at we lost the plot a little bit. No, wait, I can't put it there. I'm just kidding. I can't put it there. You know, let's put it there and let's talk about it. And then we'll see if I change my mind. So Chain of Thorns, I really loved this book when it first came out. And I was very easy on this book as a conclusion to a series that started so insanely well for me. I truly love Chain of Gold so much. Chain of Thorns is a very similar experience, maybe not as intense of a love, but I still really like that book. But Chain of Thorns, I don't know if it delivered really on a lot of what was set up. I think that the book kind of dilly-dallied for a long portion of the page count. It was a bit of a letdown and a bit of a disappointment. I think that it was still very well written, but the pacing was really off. This book also suffered from opening up plot threads in the last book of the series, and that just is something that I can never agree with. Like, it's never going to work for me to do that. You need to set those plot threads up way earlier in your series, or you're just going to be floundering when you're trying to conclude everything in, you know, a way that works. The epilogue of the book was very warm and, you know, I'm glad that we got such a happy ending for the characters and we wrapped it up in such like a nice and cozy way. But I think that the epilogue should have actually been the last chapter, and I think we should have got an actual epilogue because it just didn't feel conclusive enough to me. It didn't feel like we were done. It felt like, you know, we were maybe getting another book in the series, or it didn't have the finality that the end of Clockwork Princess had. And I know the end of Clockwork Princess, we do find out, you know, we're gonna see Jem and Tessa again. So there was, you know, that thread that we were going to still be following, but we got to see in the epilogue of Clockwork Princess a look at the years that Jem and Will were together. I mean, not Jem and Will. that was a Freudian slip. Got to see the years that Tessa and Will were together, and, you know, the years of them and their children, and all the way to the end of Will's life. I cannot talk about that at length because I will start to cry. But there was an air of finality in that moment, and, you know, it was a beautiful, bittersweet moment. I just don't feel like, unless Cassandra Clare plans to bring all these characters back to life in the Wicked Powers, or have us meet their ghosts, which I know is a popular fan theory for Will. We all are wishing and hoping that Will's ghost makes a comeback and talks to Jem and Tessa in the Wicked Powers. But unless there's something more going to happen other than the Matthew short story collection, it just does not give enough of an air of finality. And I do wish that there had been some further information on how they all live for the rest of their lives. Like when and how, and, you know, do Cordelia and James have a happy marriage for the rest of their lives? Like, how many kids do they have? Like, you know, what do they name their kids? Like, we don't really know anything about the rest of their lives. And I wish it would have given us a look at that in the epilogue, because it just didn't really feel conclusive. A very flawed last book in a series. I still love it for what it is, and, you know, it's obviously still a part of my favorite series, but I think that Cassandra Clare just really does have a problem with final books. Other than the Mortal Instruments series and the Infernal Devices, which were really stellar, I think that she sometimes comes up short because she's a bit too ambitious, and she doesn't know when to stop when to stop adding things. I still don't want to leave it in that tier. I think I'm going to put it in good but questionable. Some questionable choices were made, not on the scale of incest, but some questionable choices were made, I do think. And now we come to the end of the video where we have all of the short story collections, which I have read none of them, but I can already tell you Ghost of the Shadow Market is going to be in the Jem Carstairs tier, because it's literally about him. I know about it, I've heard about it, and I'm purposely putting it off because it's going to ruin my entire life. I know it's a shocker that I haven't read it yet as a James Carstairs stan, maybe even his #1 stan, but I'm gonna get around to it. But it scares me. It genuinely terrifies me. But I will get to it, but I already know it's at the top tier. Tales of the Shadowhunter Academy, I know that this is mostly from Simon's point of view, I think. I haven't read it, and I don't know if I will. I have read some of the short stories. I think there's a few that pertain to the Last Hour series, so I've read those. But I think I started the book at one point, and I wasn't very fond of other authors writing these characters. I think that there was something weird about the style the first couple stories were written in. I may get around to it someday, but I might not. Now, these last 2 books. So let me tell you something. Magnus Bane is the character of all time. He's not my favorite character of the series, but to me, he is 1000% the character of all time. I think that the impact that he had being introduced in the Mortal Instruments series in the late 2000s, early 2010s, in that particular era of, you know, queer history, him being introduced while I was a teenager as a bisexual man of color, and he just had this air of androgyny, and, you know, he was not fitting into traditional masculinity. He changed my life and the lives of many. Something absolutely shifted with the invention of Magnus Bane, and I think that he is absolutely on par with Jem for me in the series. Pretty much the reason why all of these characters are still alive. He's always helping the Shadowhunters, even if it is not exactly to his benefit. He's always helping them, and he's always coming to the rescue. I believe that he is just an iconic character in every single regard. But I do own the Bane Chronicles, and I haven't read it yet. I do actually plan on reading that one. Since we're in almost complete darkness, I'm going to very vulnerably let y'all in on a controversial opinion of mine. And I really want to hammer home that this is a subjective opinion of mine because I read these books as an adult, especially the Mortal Instruments series. I reread them as a fully grown adult, and how important of a character Magnus is to me. I am not a fan of his relationship with Alec. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, please. In comparison to the shining, incredible, unique character that Magnus is, Alec just does not even come close to the level that Magnus is on. Oh, sorry, I know that's really controversial, but no, like really, I think that Magnus just deserves better. Like, I think that he could be with someone 10 times more interesting and 10 times more interesting. I don't know. Now, let me clarify, Magnus and Alec's relationship was groundbreaking in terms of queer representation in YA fantasy, in books in general, in the entire industry, in the entire genre, everything. I think that this was really, really groundbreaking at the time, just the same as like Glee was and like Kurt and Blaine were. They were groundbreaking at the time, but now I was a huge Kurt and Blaine stan. And now I look back and I'm like, that was a bit toxic. And that was like maybe not the best pairing in terms of personalities. And like, I don't think that necessarily they should have stayed together until the end of time. I think that they were cute and like really, really life-changing to me back then. But like now that we are so far past that, it's like, So Red Scrolls of Magic, I don't know that I'm entirely interested, but never say never. I think that I can definitely say that this is an accurate representation of my thoughts and feelings on every single book in the Shadowhunters Chronicles. Let's discuss in the comments. If you've made it to the end of this video, let me know what you think. Let me know what your favorite and least favorite Shadowhunter books are. Please, I'm so interested to know. If you have different opinions to mine, I respect you. Even though I truly think mine are correct, I do 1000% respect your views on the series. And that's all I have. We are in complete and utter darkness. The lighting is so bad, the quality is so bad, but we did it. We did it. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.